Okay, I think we are up and running. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I am your host, Sheena Rodriguez, with the Secure the Border podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening in. I know it's been a little while since I have done a podcast or a broadcast. Obviously, I try to do these things every week or two, but it's just been very busy the last few weeks. And honestly, I'm thankful that I have because have waited a little while because today I have a very important, actually very important two guests coming on today. They are the whistleblowers for Project Veritas that came from DHS and HHS. We're going to get into all those acronyms and what those mean. But for those of you guys who have followed me for a while, you know inherently why this is so personal to me and why this means so much to me. We're going to bring you a ton of information, not just information that is difficult to listen to and hear and digest, but hopefully information that's going to motivate you to do exactly what we always talk about here, take action, because it's not enough to know that something is going on. It's all about those action items and how we can get active, engaged, and involved, and taking power back, right, and holding our elected officials accountable. So that's what this is all about. Thank you guys. Please like and share. If you're tuning in, we are currently going live or will be going live. We're recording it right now, but we'll be going live when this airs tonight on Facebook, Twitter, Getter, YouTube. Please like and share. If you are listening to this and watching this on our private Facebook page, Secure the Border page, guys, please remember that is a private page. So you're going to have to go to my personal Facebook page or the Alliance for a Safe Texas Facebook page to share. But please help us break those algorithms, especially on Facebook. Like and share. And I want to go ahead and just get right straight to it. And let's get started, shall we? Okay, so today I have with us today Tara Rodas and Aaron Stevenson. Okay, there we go. All right, we're bringing them on. Tara is one of the two whistleblowers that we have on. She is a former employee for over 19 years with the Inspector of the Attorney General's office and also volunteered with HHS. You guys hear me talk about HHS and ORR so often, but if you're not aware, that is Health and Human Services, and saw firsthand some of the issues that we're going to be discussing today. And then Aaron Stevenson is a veteran, served over 17 years, also with our federal agencies with DHS, and was an intelligence research specialist for the U.S. Citizenship Immigration Services, or also what I like to call just USCIS, because that's just so much easier, and also within the Department of Homeland Security, or DHS. And so thank you guys so much, Tara and Aaron. Thank you for everything that you guys do, and thank you for coming on today. I'd like for you guys to just kind of share a little bit of information about yourselves, if you can, so we can get started. Tara, do you want to go first?
Sure. So this month, as a matter of fact, I will pass 20 years of federal service, and have started my career because I wanted to be able to help people. When I was in college, I had the privilege to intern for a United States senator and a United States congressman, and I saw that through government, people really can help. And so I decided to join federal service. And that's how I ended up volunteering to actually help. You may remember that in 2021, the Biden administration asked for help with the humanitarian crisis at the border. They needed help to place unaccompanied children or migrant children with sponsors here in the United States. And I volunteered to do that because I thought it was a family reunification program. And so I deployed. I actually live in Virginia, but I deployed first to Texas, great state of Texas, yay, for training. And then I deployed to the Pomona Fairplex Emergency Intake Site in Pomona, California. And that's how I have all the information that I'm going to share with you tonight. And so thank you so much, Sheena, for having me on and telling the story of the children.
Thank you so much, Tara. And yes, great state of Texas. We are a very special and unique, and of course, in my opinion, that is incredibly biased, the greatest state in the union. But Aaron, thank you so much, Tara. Aaron, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, so my name is Aaron Stevenson. I'm actually fired now as a federal employee, and I'm here because I want to be. So I'll talk more as far as my intro. Yeah, that's about it. We'll get right into it. Let's just save time.
All right, well, let's do it. And yes, and I want to hear, because again, I asked you guys to come on. Tara, I know I had reached out to you. I guess like a few weeks ago now was probably the first initiation of me reaching out to you, because I noticed that you were on Twitter and I saw both you and Aaron. Aaron was the very first whistleblower that I had seen on Project Veritas. Oh gosh, I can't even remember the very first date when that first drop came out. But it seems like forever ago. And at first it was under it was what do they call it, like undercover, if you will. You did not reveal who you were, but the information that you put out in that first drop with Project Veritas, I was following along very closely, and the reason why too was because, for those who follow me and have been following me for a while, you guys know that I have been all over our border, particularly here in Texas, from the RGV, the Rio Grande Valley, through Laredo, Roma, La Jolla, up to, I spent a lot of time in the Del Rio sector and all that encompasses, up to El Paso, and then also with our friend and colleague Anthony Aguero and our friend Maria out there in Yuma, Arizona. So I've been on the front line, and I've had a lot of interaction, particularly with these unaccompanied minors. And for a long time, people had heard me talking about the large influx of unaccompanied minors coming into the Roma and La Jolla area. And I have interviewed and spent time with a lot of these children, and a lot of the things that you, Tara and Aaron, brought forth was kind of an extension with what I had experienced when these children first crossed over. Like literally, I watched them cross over from the hands of the coyotes, and then asking them, and speaking with them, spending time with them, 10 years old, a 10-year-old little girl coming from Guatemala who tells me her story of the journey over here, but then also explains on how that she was told who her sponsor was going to be, and she had never even met them, but she was told that this was her uncle that to ask for when she got here to the United States. And I have all of this stuff documented, and then knowing that was shortly after that was when Axios, of course, reported. I think they were one of the first ones early on in the Biden administration that reported that up to 40% of these unaccompanied minors they just simply lost track of. But Aaron, and then here we are, fast track here. But Aaron and Tara were on in the inside, seeing the inner workings of what these children were telling me, what was happening and what was going on. But then they were on the inside from the opposite side. So Aaron, with that very first drop, you had mentioned on how you had noticed in your position within DHS how the criminal gang members like MS-13, MS-18 were applying to become sponsors of these unaccompanied minors. And so I was following along. So will you share with the audience right now a little, some of your experience and what you discussed on that Project Veritas? You did two of them, Project Veritas drops.
Yeah. All right. So I will always do, of course, I'll spell it out, but I will drop into acronyms eventually. So pardon my, very government language, but this is the way it has to be delivered. So I worked on a mission called the Transnational Organized Crime Watch List, or the TOC watch list. And that's a separate watch list from what most people think of watch listing. Most people think about terrorism. So you've got an international terrorism one, then an international, basically just like criminal one, right? And this activity is basically when a named organization who's, they're part of the watch list, when they do crime in two different countries, one of them the United States. So you can have, a gang in Mexico who does operations in America. That could be a TOC organization. Well, these things, because it's like MS-13, 18th Street Gang, cartels, it's not just Mexico, of course. It's a lot of our southern, countries below us. So we call it the Northern Triangle, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, but it's, a lot of places. So this TOC watch list had been enacted by President Obama back in like I think it was as early as like 2014 with the things, but it really kind of became a pilot program by about 2015, 2016. And then it was very, very small, and we didn't really see a lot with it where I worked at, called USCIS. And that's because it was a very small watch list. So the population that was on it were like people that don't go to immigration for benefits, right? Because most international gangsters don't come to America and ask for a visa. Go figure. However, when Trump came in, he added on, by him, I mean him and his administration, added on those cartels. So MS-13, 18th Street Gang, Paesis, there are other cartel networks out there that they put on the watch list, meaning aliens inside of those organizations are not going to get watch listed. And at this time, this thing was capped. So on the terrorism watch list, there is no like cap. There can be over 1 million identities on there. If they wanted to, they could add on 5 million. It's not like it's limited. But on the transnational organized crime watch list, it was capped by every 10,000. So initially it was only to 10,000, and then 20,000, 30,000, etc. And when you put on these gangs, like the thing skyrocketed because there's so many criminals in those gangs that it's easy to find them. And that's when my work, USCIS, started to see a lot more of them because they do utilize our immigration system, which I'll get into in a second. And so I've been working this thing for, again, about almost 5 years now, when I started the first thing in 2021, which is February 2021. So Joe Biden's first full month in office is when I see this thing called these encounters. Encounters come in as an email. It's an unclassified email, and it's basically literally an email of an alien who's on the TALK watch list and how they were encountered. So not spilling the entire situation of everything, but you will see these encounters for things like being encountered by USCIS for an immigration benefit. They could be getting arrested. They could be getting deported. And there's other things too, but like those are some examples. And so these things come in all the time. Every day we would get about like maybe 20, at this point in time in 2021, about like 20 a day, maybe 25 a day, and for different reasons. Well, so in February 2021, I see one pop in my inbox, and it says, for the reason for the encounter, 6 USC 279 USC sponsor. And I had no idea what that meant. So I didn't really pay attention to it until about a month later, in March 2021, I saw a second one. And I was like, all right, well, that's weird because I remember seeing this thing. So I searched at my inbox to compare all of the records because I had every single encounter going back to when this thing first started. And there was only one match from 2020, and that was from 2021 in February. So I was like, oh, that's a new thing. I wonder what this thing is. So I Googled it to find out what it was, and it's talking about unaccompanied children, which I didn't really know what that was because I never worked it before.
So I'm sorry to enter. Hold on one second. So just to clarify, basically what you're saying is that you've had, since the Obama administration, you were used to this kind of, to getting these typical types of email, right? Emails
Yep.
With information. But prior to February 2021, in your work experience, this was the first time, which was
Correct.
right after Biden came in, that this had come across, that you began receiving these types of things, which was these individuals that were on this classified under the TCO, right? That were applying to become sponsors of unaccompanied minors. So to be clear, prior to Biden, at the Biden administration, you had not seen this before.
Correct. So just to make sure that's very clear, like we would see aliens or these TOC criminals, we'd see them walk up to like a USCIS, oh, I'm trying to get my green card, or, I'm trying to get a work permit, or fingerprints down because you're getting deported, things like that. Now we see these things come in and it says literally 6 USC 279 USC sponsor. So it's just like, again, it's the first time it's ever happened before, which this is going over many, many years now. And it just stood out to me. So again, in March, I found the second one, and that's when I kind of confirmed it was the only two I've ever seen before. So by April, it's the third one. So that's 3 in 3 months, one per month. And then that usually kind of tells you, it's like, all right, this is looking like it could become a thing here. So since it was something that could be developing, I looked around because I was curious, well, who's working this information? Because my work doesn't look at these UACs like that. So let's look around. So I looked up other parts of the DHS. I went to CBP, ICE, Border Patrol, and none of them
had real quick
intelligence products.
I'm so sorry. Real quick, for those who are listening that may not understand, we're going to try to break down the acronyms a little bit. The UAC is
the
no, you're good. That's why I'm just interjecting.
Yeah, that's the unaccompanied alien child. Tara, her program called it the UC program, which is same thing, unaccompanied alien child. They just dropped the alien part because Joe Biden. But so I looked around, and again, it doesn't exist anywhere inside of other entities of DHS. So Customs and Border Patrol, ICE, Immigration, Customs Enforcement, Border Patrol. And the way that works, by the way, is Customs and Border Patrol, they kind of man the ports of entry in and out. They control those things. In between those ports is Border Patrol blocking to make sure no one comes in. If you get through and you shouldn't, that's where ICE takes care of you. Or if you're trying to get in legally or you're in legally trying to do stuff properly, that's where my work would come in. So that's how like immigration kind of works. And no one had written about it. So then I hit up DHS INA, Intelligence and Analysis, and they hadn't written about it. So I look at other parts of the transnational organized crime watches community. So DOJ, FBI, the Terrorist Screening Center, none of these places have. And so by this point in time, it's like May now, I see another one come in, and it's like, okay, this is getting weird. And this is the real key part to understand here. So don't forget the time frame. I've never seen these things before, okay? So now keep in mind two important numbers. The first set of numbers are how many aliens are crossing the border every month. And it's about 250,000. The Biden administration lies, and they say it's much smaller than that. But when you have all encounters, as well as all the gotaways and all the ones that are caught on camera that are not marked as gotaways, it's about 250,000 per month. That's a lot of crossings. The TOC watch list, though, is capped at this point in time. It's capped at 40,000. So there's not more than 40,000 watches to people. There's over 250,000 going across a month. And yet I'm still seeing one a month, but every 3.5 weeks or so of these dudes trying to get kids. So at this point in time, I was like, all right, I reach out to Project Veritas and I'm giving them information so that way they can do their investigation, start looking into it. And, but everything I give them is unclassified. So it's easy to corroborate. It's pretty quick stuff. And by the time I sat down to talk with them, there was a total of 8. And by the time they published it, there was a total of 9. And that came out in August 2021. Mm-hmm. So the amount of, we did a little formula, and I was trying to think about like, okay, how many of these things are actually happening then? Of how many kids come across per month, how many total encounters per month, how many total everything per month. And I'm thinking it's like probably in like the maybe up to 700 kids maybe getting trafficked, because this is just getting strange. And the other thing that's important to remember too is, who are the aliens trying to do this? So I had one that was a female, so it's not just dudes. They're not all just like South American, Central Americans. One was a Romanian dude with a Romanian group. And then on top of that, the gangs that were doing it from Central America, it's MS-13 and 18th Street, which means it's coming from El Salvador. These dudes were Guatemalan, they're Honduran. It's not like it's just, there's one niche of the market here. So no, this is an activity now that looks like it's getting across the board, everyone's doing. And that's what really kind of made my buzzer go off by being like, something is wrong here. This is a major problem. And the last thing before Tara takes over, because this is when her story kicks in, is right before I sat down with Project Veritas for the interview, DHS, INA, Intelligence and Analysis, they are the actual component of DHS that's a member of the intelligence community. They had printed off and distributed their, internally, of course, not like publicly. It's called a intelligence primer, a collection primer. And this was solely about organized crime. Okay. It's about 80 pages long, and I printed it out. I read through the entire thing. I also read it online so I can do some, control find search stuff. And all I did was look for the words like trafficking, child, sponsor, unaccompanied child, UAC. I'm using all these terms, 6792, everything. And it doesn't exist. So they don't even talk about it. So it's important to understand too. So I'm looking for information that hopefully someone's writing on, which nobody was. But the way intelligence works, it's not like we just go out there and think of problems. We operate top down. So the president says, I want to know about these activities or these countries or these activities in these countries. And then his department goes, okay, well, we can answer that question and this one, we can cover that topic. And then they delegate it down further. So by the time it gets down to us, we're so low that it's like, okay, what are the indicators of warnings of, exploitations and loopholes in the immigration system? And there's nothing going on for sex trafficking for organized crime. And it's like, well, we know what's going on. We know it's an activity and we're told not to look for it. So of course, no one in the government's looking for it. We're not told to. So that's August 2021 and intro to Tara.
Yeah. So did you have any other questions, Sheena, before I pick up?
There was something that I just want to point out to those who have, again, followed me, because I have a feeling that tonight we're going to have a lot of new people that probably don't know who I am and the work that I've done. But you just mentioned something earlier, Aaron. You said Romanians. You said the Romanian gangs. And I remember reading about that. And the reason why that's important, well, all of this is important, but I'm saying for those who know the work that I've done, Anthony, my friend and colleague with Border Network News, and my brother from another mother and father, Anthony Aguero, and I actually investigated and I wrote a few articles about Romanian trafficking cases, clusters, if you will, that are popping up all around Texas. From El Paso, I posted trends that we saw right here. I'm in the DFW area, the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And so when you said that, again, this is why I'm so drawn to all of this, not just the information that you guys are putting out, but because me being on, I hate to use cliche words, the front line, but also being aware and reporting on things like the Romanian clusters and why I tied that to the trafficking of and why they're so easy to exploit. I wrote articles in the Texas Scorecard about this very thing that's popping up all around Texas. So that's the reason why I just wanted to interject that there.
No worries, because I actually have one more thing as well, and I should have included this. Sorry, Sarah, do you mind if I do this real quick?
No, go right ahead.
All right. So the other important thing to understand how this TOC watch list works is the loophole that was created as well. So if you are this, illegal alien who came in, as these TOC aliens are, and then they get deported or put in, removal proceedings, if they make a claim that they'll be persecuted or harmed or tortured or, you can't send me back to my home country, bad things will happen to me. What happens is that's a thing called defensive asylum. But before you get there, you have to do a screening process done by USCIS. It's called credible fear. It's also one called reasonable fear. It's the same thing. It means we're going to look at you to see if your claim is like a thing or not. And then if they say yes, which they do about 80% of the time, then it goes forward to the asylum judge or to the immigration judge. And that may take years. But if you're on the TOC watch list and you say, don't send me back home because bad things will happen to me, you are then removed from the TOC watch list, which means out of a list of 40,000, and it never hit that cap at the time I came public, dudes were dropping off all the time. So now again, when you think about it, if I'm only seeing one per month and yet all of these dudes are dropping off and it's only up to this high anyways, and we know the encounters are way higher than that, the real number of trafficking is much, much higher than we understand. So important to understand because terrorist program was way higher than that. Any questions on that?
And I just want to,
Sheena?
I know I remember, and I'm just sharing this exactly. This was the article that I had written about that, exactly that, the Romanian. So I'll make sure to post that in some of the comments afterwards as well, so that people can read how what he's talking about is tying into to what like my friend and colleague and I have been talking about. But with that right there, I remember that there was this shift, and that was in the second drop that you did with Project Veritas as well, where you talked about the loophole. And I think that a lot of people who may not be familiar with some of the immigration stuff, I'm learning. I'm only know a lot more because from being out there on the ground and being connected and like immersed in this over the last 3 years now. But when they had even announced in the last drop that you talked about with James O'Keefe, when they had even announced the shift that they were going to be sending down and changing the adjudication process and all of that, like that ties right into with what you're saying, with that shift in the immigration policy that most people may not be able to really understand. And this is just another way that unfortunately the current administration is able to hide. Like you said, you have so many dropping off, so many more being like, it's like this rotating cloud of deceit. Honestly, I don't know how else to put it. So that they do make it very difficult to be able to even track any of this.
It's completely uncontrolled. They have no idea what's going on, and they have no idea the population that's coming in. That might sound bad and scary, and it really is that bad and scary.
Yeah.
So.
And people should be infuriated by this. And again, from Tara, you saw Aaron on Project Veritas when he came forth, and you were already, like you had said in the beginning, transitioning now to how you kind of fit into all of this. you thought that you were helping. They made out this call for help because we did have, I think it's well over, over 350,000 unaccompanied minors so far since fiscal year 2021 to current. I think it's getting close to almost 60,000 at this point, just for fiscal year 2023 alone. Over 200,000 of these unaccompanied minors have crossed over the state of Texas, because of course we do have the largest stretch of borderland, southwest borderland. And I'm just going to put this into perspective. And for those who have heard me speak, just in Tarrant County and Dallas County in the DFW, just the two counties, Tarrant and Dallas, I'm in Tarrant, we have had over 86,000, and this is according to HHS and ORR, which I would wager in the spirit of our conversation here to believe that that is grossly underreported. But just according to them, their own stats, over 8,600 unaccompanied minors have been released to sponsors here in Tarrant County and Dallas County alone since fiscal year 2021. And so when you do the math, and I want you guys to consider this, if you do the math and you're talking about 1 in 3 or 4 up to 40%, right, of these unaccompanied minors simply that they just lose track of. Let's not even get into Houston. We're just talking DFW alone. That is about over 3,000. Math is not my best subject, but over 3,000 of these kids right here in Tarrant and Dallas County, who very likely, if you're going at it from a statistical standpoint, we don't know who they were released to. And we know that DFW and Houston go back and forth. They unfortunately try to fight for who's going to be the sex trafficking capital. Houston, of course, is now number 1, but this is why this is so unbelievable. One of the many reasons why this is so unbelievably important. But now, Tara, going back to this, Tara, you were in the inside believing that you were helping reunify the similar talking points. You thought you were helping to reunify these children with safe sponsors, with their parents, with their family. And so will you please go ahead and go into share your story of what you experienced being on the inside, helping with these unaccompanied minors with HHS?
Sure. So I think it's important to note that when I raised my hand to volunteer to go help with this mission, I had no idea that one child had ever been trafficked through this program or harmed as a result of this program. Not a clue. So when I arrived at the Pomona Fairplex, which was in May of 2021, I was there. My background is in education, so I thought I was going to be maybe helping the children learn English. So my husband is actually from El Salvador. So mi español no es perfecto, pero yo puedo hablar. And so I thought, I've been to Mexico, I've been to El Salvador and Guatemala. I thought, wow, I can really talk with the kids, share about what their hopes are and their dreams are and help them feel comfortable. So in the beginning, I was just sitting at tables with them and drawing and coloring and doing puzzles. I was walking them to their medical appointments. We had medical staff. I was taking them to meals, things like that. And then it was at the end of May, they had an urgent need for help in case management. And anytime they needed somebody to volunteer for something, I always raise my hand. So I'm like, hey, I'm here, send me. So I was one of the 10 people chosen to work in case management. And I had only been in case management a couple of weeks when we had what I called suspicious sponsor activity. And what I mean by that is the stories that the children were saying versus what people in home country were saying. And then as the case managers were talking to the potential sponsor here in the United States, like the stories were not matching up. Sponsors, which is the person who's going to take legal custody of the child, right? So HHS is they have custody of the child given to them from CBP. So when the Border Patrol takes the children, they actually then they give them their paperwork, they give them their A number, and then they transfer custody to HHS. Then HHS transfers custody to what is supposed to be a safe sponsor here in the United States. But what I saw it was kind of like speed over safety. We've got to move these kids, have to move these kids. And so I was witnessing like driver, they would send their ID, and then they'd send the paperwork in, and they're sending all this stuff by WhatsApp to the case manager who's actually working with the child, and the IDs were not matching. And I'm like, well, why is that? We have to know where the child is going. And then after we learn the system more and figured out, hey, we've got 40 kids in an apartment building in Austin, Texas. We have 300 children in like a 2 square mile in Houston, Texas. What's going on here? We've got this place, we have hotspots all around the country where multiple children have gone to people. Now, that doesn't make sense. How is it that a sponsor can sponsor 20 children? I mean, that just doesn't make sense. And then when you think about it, what child welfare organization anywhere is going to release a child to someone who they have never seen the home? They have no idea how many people are living in that home. They request no documentation to see if this sponsor actually has any financial resources to care for the child. They don't do proper vetting backgrounds, because remember, HHS is not a law enforcement organization. They don't have law enforcement personnel running background checks. So the people who were the case managers working on that site, we had no investigators. This is stunning to people. Like, you're transferring children and you have no investigative personnel. You have no law enforcement looking into these people. So we had been putting forward, and I put forward a lot of trafficking cases, suspected trafficking, ones that we know people had provided false documentation. Because remember, people on the site, they're not experts in document fraud, and definitely not in international documentation. So a majority of the sponsors, I think Aaron has the exact number, but I know it's over 90%, have no legal status here in the United States. So they're not citizens, and they don't have permanent resident status, or they're not here on a visa. So we have no way to really know who is this person. And so that's, it's very, very concerning that we're transferring custody to unknown people with unknown backgrounds, with unknown history. So this was all very disturbing to me. And someone had sent me a copy of the Senate report back from 2016. And anybody can go look this up. All these things that we're talking about tonight, it's all, public record. You can look on HHS's website. You can look at there, you've got it, right? So, and under the Obama-Biden administration, they actually had children all the way back then trafficked through the program. And that's what the report that Sheena and I just held up exposes, right? Children were trafficked through the program back as far as 2014. So that was stunning to me to learn that not only did they know children were being trafficked through the program, but their metric was move the kids, move the kids, move the kids. It was 10 to 14 days. And you can look at the average release time, because it does have it on the site, on their website, on HHS's website. And most children were released in like 33 days or 34 days. So what organization is going to release a child to someone that they've only spent a couple of weeks vetting? This doesn't even make any sense whatsoever. But it took things to another level when in August of 2021, so remember, from May, when I had no idea ever one child was trafficked through the program, to seeing all of these different trafficking cases and suspected trafficking cases and false documentation. And then I see Aaron's video. Somebody sent it to me, where it's, Aaron was alleging that transnational criminal organizations were sponsoring these children. Now, as I said, my husband's from El Salvador, and I've heard lots of stories. Things that if you can go in and read about what people do. And for most of us, it would make us vomit what they do to people. And when I grasped that we had criminal networks here who were getting these children. And remember, the administration knows that trafficking has been going on at least since 2014. And now they've relaxed all the rules, and the most number of children that have ever been released are being released. In just the few months that I was at Pomona, that site, to be an emergency intake site, it can't be open any longer than 6 months, because that's what it's there for. It's an emergency. It's 6 months. They processed more than 8,300 children. We sent more than 1,000 to Texas in that short period of time. Can you imagine? You're just sending children out. It just makes no sense whatsoever. So when I saw Erin's story, I circulated that around the site, and it took us less than 2 weeks when a case manager came up to me and said, Tara, I feel really weird about this case. It was the sponsor. She was female, and she actually lived in Ohio, and she was simultaneously sponsoring 2 children. So one was from our site in Pomona. One was from the Fort Bliss emergency intake site in Texas. And I was like, this is absolutely not, this is not good, because I did not want to confirm, right, what Erin was saying. This was a horrifying prospect. And so we started looking into it. The case manager, she was great. She got the sponsor to self-disclose, because our background check. So think about it. If we're giving children to unknown sponsors with no presence, it's not as if we're looking into their background in home country. This is the thing that needs to ring the alarms to people. Like, we're actually not looking into the backgrounds of the people who we're giving these children to. So therefore, when these criminal organizations that use these children for profit, right, they know that they can come here and operate because nobody's looking into them. And so we're giving them their workers, whether that's for labor or whether that's for sex. And we know it's happening because we're seeing in the newspaper all the time. Even the New York Times recently ran an article about how the children are being trafficked. So long story short, when I discovered that, yes, indeed, it was actually a very high ranking member, her partner. And I was ringing the alarms. I said, we can't, do not release. And as it turned out, they ended up releasing the girl to the sponsor. And I said, at that point, I just have to go outside of all chain of command. And so I reached out to the Office of Inspector General at 2 different agencies and reported. And obviously people were concerned and wanted to try to do something. But HHS, they did not want this information to get out. And so the more information I kept discovering and putting forward, they started to retaliate against me, especially after they discovered that I had reported it to the Office of Inspector General. So anyway, it's very sad. It was horrible for me to discover what was going on. I tell people I went through the stages of grief like 10 times, first realizing that it was happening, then realizing that the government knew it was happening, then realizing that the government relaxed the rules so that it could move faster, and to see the results of what was happening. It was just horrible. So I ended up being falsely accused. I was threatened with investigation. I mean, all of this literally within 3 weeks of me reporting that we had a transnational criminal organization that was attempting to get children. That was it, man. I was off the site, and it happened so fast. My head was spinning. So yeah, I was walked off the site. And in the process of being walked off the site, I was told that, this matter was going to be investigated, and my badge was taken. So, you have to say, when the administration makes a call for volunteers to come help, you have a federal employee who's worked for the government for 20 years this month, right, who volunteers to help. And they, I'm reporting very serious things that are happening within the program, and they decide to try to shut it down. it doesn't really make sense. That it just lets me see that something very serious and nefarious is going on in the program that they don't want people to see. So that's why, Sheena, I thank you so much for having me and Aaron on the call tonight, because one thing Aaron and I know, and I know you know, or you wouldn't be doing this, is that one voice can make a difference. And there are children right now. I mean, I wouldn't be sitting here. It's almost 8 p.m. here in Washington, D.C. on my Friday night talking about this if I didn't believe that there were things that we can do to make a difference, because hundreds of thousands of children have crossed the border. The federal government has spent more than $10 billion in 2 years. They're asking for $7 billion for 1 year upcoming. That's what they want, to disperse these children all around the country. What we are witnessing, I call it government sponsored, taxpayer funded child trafficking. But if you can really open your eyes to see it, and again, there were moments on the site, I'm like, no, I don't want to see this. I don't want to know this. There were days I thought maybe I need to quit. I mean, it was so emotionally distressing. But this right now is the most well-funded, organized child trafficking ring actually that exists on the planet today. So the United States government, right, the coyotes, the smugglers are bringing the children to the border. The US government is the middleman, and then dispersing the children directly to the traffickers. We are the middleman. And it is horrible. I mean, it's just horrific to think about. And if I had not seen it with my own eyes, I'm not even sure I could believe it. But I know right now today there are children in distress, and I know there are things that your listeners can do. And so that's why we're here, and we really appreciate you and all the listeners.
Sheena.
Yes.
May I? So one
Yes,
important
please.
thing we should have done at the beginning too is a lot of people, and I'm sure your audience, this is not them. I'm sure they're probably pretty educated because you're a good host. However, a lot of people don't understand what trafficking is. It's a word that we know, but it's like, do we really know it? So Tara, can you just clearly tell us what trafficking really means? Like
Sure.
of trafficking.
So there's a difference between smuggling and trafficking. So smuggling is simply the act of transporting the child. But trafficking is actually, you have to prove that there's force, fraud, or coercion, and then there's a purpose for it. Like it could be debt bondage, it could be slave labor, it could be sex trafficking. So there's actually what's called an action, a means, and a purpose. So they're transporting the children, they're using force, fraud, or coercion, and most of it is, a big portion of it is fraud. They're telling them they're going to have this great life, and then they're putting them into debt bondage. They're putting them into slave labor, as the New York Times, as NBC, as all these papers are now reporting. They're having this massive problem with child labor. Well, why is that? The reason we have a problem with child labor is not because the Labor Department is not doing their job. No. The reason we have a problem with child labor is because HHS has lost control of their program. HHS has lost control of the unaccompanied children program. They're pumping billions of dollars transporting and distributing children around the country to unvetted sponsors who are criminals. They are members of transnational criminal organizations, right, on the TOC watch list, as Aaron has evidence. We know these are high-level criminal actors, and they have these children. And it's totally unacceptable. And you had mentioned that, James O'Keefe and Project Veritas, they spent 9 months on this investigation before this story was released in November of last year. When they knocked on doors in Houston, the children were telling them horrible stories. A little girl, she's like 5. She's living with 4 other adult men who she's not related to. And the undercover journalist who knocked on the door, she said, Tara, I just wanted to run with that little girl. I don't think anyone had bathed her in months. A teenager, 15 years old. She's here She got to start school. She had to quit school because she has a debt to the cartel. She has to pay her smuggling debt. And then the 16-year-old girl, she says, Tara, she didn't say to me, she said to the undercover journalist, she said, they tell me my sponsor is my aunt, but I've never met her, but she's pimping me out for sex. So this little girl, and when the undercover journalist said, well, where is this happening? Is she taking you somewhere? Is it in the house? She's like, no, in her house. So this poor little child has to live in a home where guys are just coming in and having sex with her. I can't imagine this child going to bed at night not knowing what her next day is going to hold. This is unacceptable that the federal government is the middleman in these trafficking schemes.
And I thank you for going into some of those cases that were uncovered with the Project Veritas. I can only imagine what that investigative reporter felt like. And I showed some quick little clips of some of the children that I've personally encountered down there. Some of the identification that was discarded on our Texas border of these children. And you have to ask yourself why. And again, you hit on something, and there's this part, and that's kind of what we discussed a little bit earlier on, is what I'm hearing directly from the children, where they are showing me, and let me see if I can do it again. I think it kind of caused some of the glitching here, but where they're telling me that they are being told by the NGOs, by people within these NGOs, these women that they were meeting in Central America, being told who their sponsor was going to be, being told that aunt, you don't remember them, in Guatemala, but and there's the identification, but that's who you're going to ask for, and they would write it down on the piece of paper, many of them that I have, and I have a lot of this documentation. The one girl that you saw in the clip of the video there, this was her wristband that the cartel put on her. In her case, the cartel had taken her away. She is a very beautiful girl, 14 years old, from Belize, and spoke fluent English and Spanish. Unlike many of the other unaccompanied minors that we had spoken to, she was not raped along the way. She was not shoved into these warehouses and the big buses, or 18-wheelers like so many of these other unaccompanied minors. She was kept separately with a female that she was relatively clean. But she was torn apart from her mother and her 3 brothers. And you have to ask yourself why. And when I talk about that story, I always ask them, well, why? Why would, think about it, right? Why would a beautiful, exotic looking young girl, 14 years old, bilingual from Belize, be kept separate than all the rest of the other children? Because there's a higher price tag, isn't there, for virgins? So these are the things that are happening right here in Texas. This is real. And again, what I had seen, what the children were telling me straight from, I watched them cross into Texas. And what they're telling me straight from their mouth, showing me these little pieces of paper, handwritten notes of who to ask for when they get here, that they've never met before.
Yeah.
And then you guys were in the inside and hearing and seeing these very same things. I wanted to point out in the 2016 report that we had reference to as well. It says here that this is on page 19 of the report, unlike state foster care systems, HHS does not conduct home studies for all protective sponsors, even category 3 sponsors. Right now, we're currently working on HB 5000. Representative Stan Kitzman has put forth legislation trying to make it a requirement. I'm so thankful for him, because this is one of the ways when you see, and we could have gone into so many different things, from Sarah Carter's interviews of interviewing a trafficker, right? A cartel member, talking about taking these children for organ harvesting and sex trafficking, very real things, to, like you said, the New York Times. I have those articles up. 86,000, according to the New York Times, who is a very left leaning media group, right? That admitted that in their investigations, according to their documents, 86,000, 86,000, 86,000 unaccompanied minors, DHS and ORR, HHS just lost track of. They talked about the trafficking of these children, child laboring, and thank you so much, Aaron, for getting into that specific difference, right, between smuggling and trafficking. Frito-Lay, Nestle, so many other, Whole Foods, right? Trafficking and using these children for child laboring of unaccompanied minors. The poultry plants, the what was it? Hyundai Motor Company. Like these children are being used and exploited, and I'm going to tell you why. It's so easy. A lot of them don't exist. And when they do come over, they're any type of forms of identification, a lot of the times gets discarded. And I showed I have a bin full of trash. My husband can't stand it. He's like, why? Because I have documents. I'm telling you, these children do not exist. Nobody knows that they're even here. There's no way to track them down. And these are just the ones that we have on file. When we talk about the getaways, how many of those gotaways are children? I've seen a lot of the footage of including women and children, right, from the gotaways. So we're just talking about the ones that are on paper, that there's at least some record of, right? And they even said right here, according to the 2016 report, which, please, I mean, guys, read this, according to HHS, however, a sponsor, get this, is free to refuse post-release services, basically refusing to allow HHS or its care providers to have any contact with a child after release. The sponsor must consent before services are provided and can withdraw consent whenever the sponsor chooses. We're referring to like home care studies. The sponsors that the very same sponsors that we're talking about, which I know even in this report, they said that 60% of the sponsors were migrants or illegal aliens themselves. Now, I know that you had mentioned possibly 90%. We can't even properly vet these people. This is right here. These very same sponsors can just refuse that. Like, even if HHS does actually try to do something, or these NGOs like Endeavors tries to follow up with a home study, these sponsors can be like, no, we're not going to allow that to happen. Please.
All right, because you hit a lot there, and what's important to understand are a lot of these things. So the 2016 report you're referring to, that came from a 2016 Senate hearing in which they brought up, 2 people from HHS, and they brought in 3 people from as witnesses because they work for the NGOs. And we'll get to that in a second. So just people understand too, these policies are written by the government. Like, HHS writes these rules. We can get into the detail, but it's the administrative state. This is how the government operates. So in that 2016 hearing, the 2 people that they brought up from HHS, one was the Assistant Acting Secretary of Homeland Security. His name was something Greenberg. I forgot his first name. But the other guy was named something, whatever. He works for ORR. He was the actual director. So that director at ORR, he's now gone off to some Soros Open Society Foundation, whatever it's called, a very open borders type thing. But that ex-assistant secretary, that guy, that Greenberg dude, he's now back at HHS, and he's part of the general counsel. This is this is how they operate. They bring these dudes in and they stay. They were gone for Trump. Now the establishment's back in power again. These dudes came straight back in again. So also the thing you said about the home studies and the categories, 1, 2, 3. All right, so a little nerdy, but you gotta pay attention to this part. So category 1 means this is where the sponsor, they testify, and their testimony is like, oh, I'm the child's mother or father. Okay. There's 2 parts of category 2, which is 2A or 2B. If you're category 2A, it means that basically you're not mom and dad, but you're a close family, mom, brother, uncle, grandpa, brother, aunt, grandpa, and you had a relationship with them as a child. A 2B is the same type of relationship, but you didn't have that thing as a child. So either, it's family, but either you know them or you don't. Category 3 is you don't know them at all. It's just some stranger is going to try to get you. So in 2022, there were a little bit more than 13,000 Category 3 sponsors. Those, by HHS policy, are supposed to get a home study mandatory. Now, those things are a joke anyways. They're not real home studies. You can do them virtually on your phone, but they're supposed to get one done. If you look up HHS's own metrics, as far as how many home studies they've done, it was under 50%. It was like 5,400 something. But by their own records, they're nowhere near to enforcing their own law. And this is why state legislatures are so important.
Yes.
You cannot rely on the federal government to do this thing, to break it up, because they're the ones who created it. The entire thing was made by the administrative state of HHS and DHS. They are the main problem. So you're not going to get a new law that says don't sex traffic children, because that already exists. It's how they enforce it. And it's really important to understand that. By the way, you did say that the New York Times is left-leaning media. It's state media. I'm just going to say it.
No, and thank you for breaking that down, because and I know I'm like showing it. I could have had it prepared, but I had other things pulled up just in case we wanted to reference to it. But right here with the categories, when I wrote, for those who have followed me, I've written extensively about some of the NGOs that are operating down here, and specifically Endeavors. That's the one that I have a little bit more knowledge into. And when we had a town hall meeting where they're attempting to open up one of these larger permanent or smaller permanent facilities, different than the influx facilities like in Pecos, right? Because those are supposed to be temporary, even though the Pecos facility grew substantially. And in the Project Veritas drop, it actually mentions one of the children that was sent to Bonita Springs, Florida. Several of those children talk about going through the Pecos facility, which was ran by Endeavors. But one of the questions that I had even asked, like Endeavors, the COO of Endeavors, Chip, he had said during the town hall that we had down there in Eagle Lake, during the Eagle Lake City Council meetings, and this is how we're talking about the action items all the way down on the city, county, and state level that Alliance for a Safe Texas focuses on, that I've been trying to focus on so intently, because this is where, like you said, Aaron, a lot of the power is. We have a lot of power on these different levels. We cannot rely on the federal agencies and the federal government that is allowing this to happen and facilitating it and using our taxpayer dollars to do it. But he even said, like almost proudly, like, oh yes, there are no children being that come through our doors that are a Category 4. Which, if you read the categories, like Aaron just explained, I'm going to read Category 3 exactly from this committee report. Distant relatives or unrelated individuals. Much of the subcommittee's investigation has focused on Category 3 sponsors, those that have no close relationship to the child and therefore resemble foster care providers or similar temporary custodial arrangements. So this is where Category 3, like, why would you need a Category 4 at that point? Essentially, like, our CPS and our foster care system, and this is saying a lot for those of you guys who know we've made some progress within our state CPS system, a child protective service system, but every state foster care system is plagued, riddled with issues and allegations of abuse within that. We have no business of even trying to take care of children from other countries and trying to project the idea, like the Biden administration, like, no, send your children because they'll be safe with us. We'll take care of them. We'll feed them. We'll clothe them. We can't even do that for American children. But even the CPS, even the foster care system within our own state has more protections than these children that are going through the UAC program. Would you agree?
Oh, definitely. Beyond a shadow of a doubt. Yeah.
By the way,
that's terrifying.
Since we're on definitions, does your audience know the definition of an unaccompanied alien child?
Please,
if not,
let's go ahead and assume they don't. Please, yes.
6 U.S. Code 279 G2. The term unaccompanied alien child means a child who has no lawful immigration status in the United States, yada, 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 and there is no parent or legal guardian in the United States. which by definition makes you go, well, then how the hell is there even a category 1? Because the category 1 is the mother or father of the child. And again, this whole thing, it just operates as if like with no accountability. There is zero like actual anything when it comes to making sure this child is safe and protected. It doesn't exist.
No, it doesn't exist. And so Sheena, I just want to make sure that I heard what you said correctly. So you're telling me someone from the Pecos site said that there were no category 3s?
No, that there was no category 4s.
Oh, meaning that there was no sponsor identified. Right.
Yes,
so
like that they have very
long-term care. Right.
Yes, that they have very few, very minute, which I believe, because when you look at like they were saying that as in a sense of like, oh yeah, like this takes care of possible trafficking issues, right? Because this is the point of it, is that when you're an NGO, right, and even with us, oh gosh, what is her name, Savannah Hernandez from the Post Millennial, and Jack Posobiec also touched on this as well, and they had a whistleblower from MVM, like Michael Victor
MVM.
Michael, right, which was one of the what do they call it? Travel youth care workers, or like a travel escort. Okay. So essentially they're like, okay, while we're taking them from the influx facility, getting them to their sponsors, we're going to travel with these unaccompanied minors to make sure that they're fed, they're clothed, and that they get what they're supposed to get to. So this is one of the kind of like what I would say, like a middleman, if you will, like how I view and categorize these NGOs that are operating within Texas, is that they interact with these children, but then they wipe their hands clean. Like, I don't have any responsibility. HHS does all of the vetting of the sponsors and all the vetting of these unaccompanied minors. We're just taking taxpayer dollars to just be the middle person, right? Well, this whistleblower came forth on Savannah Hernandez's site and on the Post Millennial, and talked about on how like the same issues, they're not being vetted, they're being released to these sponsors, that it's like an inconvenience. You notice right away, I'm a mom, I think we are parents, I know how like my children respond to me, right? How even like my niece and nephew, like something's going to trigger it, like, oh yeah, that child who's 9 years old who traveled from Guatemala by herself, you would at least expect a certain kind of response with somebody who's familiar with like a category 2 or 3, right? And it's not anything. And he reported that. And I'm saying this because even like with the NGOs, everyone is washing their hands, like, oh, well, we know that this is a problem, we see that this is happening. And then whistleblowers like you guys coming forward too, how many other whistleblowers have seen these issues, and they know that something's wrong, they can feel it, they can see it, they can see with their own 2 eyes, but they're remaining silent. And I asked Chip with Endeavors, and I said, at what point does, as an NGO that you're taking billions of taxpayer dollars to operate and purposely inject yourself as a middleman, at what point do you acknowledge that these issues exist, and that then you become you as an NGO, as a middleman, you put in extra safeguards, right? Like, and that's the reason why something like HB 5000 is important. It's not a catch-all solution by any means, but what it would do is require that these types of facilities, permanent and influx facilities all across the board, that they are licensed within the state. And then that would subject them to state regulated laws like our CPS system, right? Is it going to solve everything? No. But is it a potential buffer where, like, even in like Midland, where they literally dropped off, and I had Laura Nodoff, who was the Midland County DA. She was one of the very first people that I had on the podcast. She's a fire breather. She's amazing. And she was like, they literally dropped off, by they being the Biden administration, HHS, right? ORR, dropped off these kids in the middle of the night, didn't tell anybody, and then told the county DA who would be responsible for any allegations of abuse, and told the sheriff, like, no, you can't come into this facility, but if we have a rape case, we're going to send it over to you, which did happen. And then, we anticipate that you're expected to follow up with this. They don't even have access. These are state officials. Even the state of Texas had no idea that these buses were coming here. They put them in a man camp. Like, this is very real. So HB 5000 at least is one tiny little safeguard that is sorely needed that might give the state of Texas more sovereignty, be able to assert more state sovereignty and say, there may not be too much that we can do, but we're going to push that limit and we're going to require you to do this. And then you are submitted to oversight from our state committees, right?
Yeah. The whole thing.
That's kind of that thought process.
Yeah. The jurisdiction has to be defederalized. If any law enforcement agency, and it's not just the state level, I think if a county sheriff or a small town cop, if they start an investigation or even suspect that there's a kid getting trafficked and they find out that kid was ever in this program, they need to have immediate and all access to like every piece of paper on that kid, every system on that kid, wherever that there's info on that kid, that has to go all the way down. They have to have access to it because otherwise it's never going to stop. Can I go back to what you said though about NGOs specifically? Because
please.
The major problems there with them, and you're absolutely right on them. So in 2016, that same testimony, after they did their little fake, we're going to yell at you guys with the HHS, then they brought in 3 witnesses. 2 of them worked for NGOs. And they had, good, heartfelt stories. They were very sincere sounding. And when they were asked, well, do you guys think that you can solve this problem? Do you guys think that they're like, oh yeah, definitely. Just give us more money. And they got a ton more funding. And ever since then, the problem has been exploding. So that's not a fix. It's not going to be just, all right, well, here. But also, when you said a lot of things there, and this goes into part of the policy changes. Like, this is how fast, and this is why it can be fixed. This is how fast the government operates. So HHS has some mechanisms to do like, actual investigations and things. They do have teams that are dedicated to go around and do like actual investigative authority onto these, not only the locations, but also like the cases themselves. Like, they can go there for up to like, I think 5 days or a week or something like that. And they can just start rummaging through files. Like, they're authorized to do so, to find instances of trafficking and make sure the kids are protected. And the day after Biden is inaugurated, on January 21st, 2021, HHS submitted a rule change proposal to completely change the way that they collect information. Now, they say it's for redundancy, and it's not, because you can never be too redundant on information about protecting children in your own program. Same HHS, in May of 2021, they did a rule change of, hey, we're making a whole new system, a whole new case management system called UC Path. If you don't know the federal government, anytime they make a new system, it sucks. It never works, and it just sucks. But
shocker.
They made this new program, and they were going to change the way they collected information. So some of the things that they changed of collecting information were things like there's a human trafficking section, and they took away 16 data fields that were supposed to go inside there. One of them was, hey, while you're talking to the child, you're actually the case manager, you're talking to the child. There used to be questions in there which said like things like, hey, are you worried about going back with this new sponsor of yours? Are you concerned about the way they're going to discipline you? And all these other questions, like real ways to assure people, because as you know, as a mother yourself, when you talk to a child, if you just give them one question, they're going to respond by answering, well, this is what they want to hear, because they're kids, right? And that's your own child, let alone one who doesn't speak your language in a new country by this person who I don't know. So they will not tell you the truth right away because they're scared. What you got to do is kind of reassure them. You sit down with them. You kind of get down to their level, and you really kind of talk. You change the tone of your voice. You ask them questions a few different ways. You kind of reassure them, like, no, it's cool, dude. What happened, buddy? They change all those questions of, hey, kid, are you feeling worried, and do you feel scared, and do you feel? They boiled it down to one question of, do you have any worries? It's like they did that in May 2020. Why? Why would they change these rules as this was going in? They knew this was a major problem. And they said it like, oh, yeah, but we got to these changes because the most critical thing is we got to make sure this new UC path is up and running. Like when we say this thing's been constructed from top to bottom and from bottom to top, we mean it at least I will say it. I mean it very clearly. This thing's been constructed on purpose. I can't say it. I can't say it any other way. So
it's so in your face, and then knowing that this is orchestrated intent. I, in my opinion, to piggyback off of your opinion, intentional. This is, in my opinion, 100% intentional, and using our taxpayer dollars to do it. And we're just barely scratching the surface of these issues. Like we're not even deep diving. I mean, we could be on this podcast for hours and barely be scratching. I mean, if you even talk about the access to abortions and how easy it is for these unaccompanied minors. I mean, like, and I've talked about that
The
before
council
with,
for it.
yes,
So they do a pregnancy test on every female. So this is
Would you
something
like
that no one's asked on any of the other podcasts. And so, I just do want to do my disclaimer again.
please, no, let's get into it, because
right, I'm speaking
hold on really
behalf
quick,
of my personal opinion, not on behalf of my agency or behalf of the government, right? I'm talking about what I witnessed. So go ahead, Sheena, and then I'm going to tell you. Oh, okay. So
no, I was just going to say really quick, oh, go ahead. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I know it's like glitching. I'm sorry. I hope that this, like, for those who know me, know that I actually started in my advocacy in the pro-life movement. I was a volunteer counselor for a pro-life center here in the DFW area for a number of years. And that's actually how I began years ago when my kids were little. I've got an 18 and a 15-year-old now, but when they were little. So that's how I actually became acquainted with some of the issues of trafficking, because I would have a lot of clients coming in thinking that we were Planned Parenthood, and they were cases of forced arranged marriages that were coming in. So I say this too because this was even something that I had touched upon. I used to have information on our website, securetheboarder.us, but I had to take it down just for lack of clarity and sharing, like just having everything easily accessible, but actually talking about the easy accessibility, and I want you to go into it, so please, because of the abortions. And the reason why this is important is because this goes hand in hand with trafficking, with sex trafficking in particular as well, is that it makes it easier to hide their abuse. It makes that they are enduring as well. And so please feel free, tell us about what you've also experienced. And this is the first time I'm going to hear you talk about this. So please share details with what you know about that.
Yeah, well, every child upon arrival to HHS custody receives a medical exam, and they do a pregnancy test on every female. They do a pregnancy test, and then they counsel for abortion, and then they transfer the children to another facility where, because they can't do that on the emergency intake site, the medical staff can give vaccines and do other things like that and louse them and other things, but they don't have the ability to do that on the site. So they transfer them to another facility to have the procedure done. And they are not under any circumstances to tell the sponsor. So even if a female is going to her mother or going to her father or going to her aunt, they do not tell. I heard them. First of all, I didn't even know that was going on either. And one day I went down to the command center to talk about a trafficking case. And, they're like, come in, sit down, and they're on the phone. And they were arranging abortions for two of our girls, sending them off to another facility. They would transfer them there, have the procedures done. And I heard them say, sponsor can't know. Are we clear? Sponsor can't know. So you're taking a child who God only knows what has happened to them. And then they are sending this child for an abortion and then sending them on to a sponsor, and with no medical help, emotional, psychological. Let's not even put the fact that it's totally, absolutely unethical and irresponsible to be bringing these children here, luring them here. I think if most Latino, like people who I've told that, they're like, wait a minute, you're telling me, because most of my friends are Latino. They're like, you're telling me they're luring our children here and then aborting their babies? I'm like, oh yeah, that's exactly what's happening. And they're not telling anybody about it. So that's a whole nother thing to sound the alarm on. But there's levels. So they can't send someone to a safe sponsor, but they can sure make sure that the girls, get abortions.
So
Aaron,
look it up yourself. Yep. Field Guidance 20 of HHS for this whole program, the ACF ORR Field Guidance 20. If you want to pull it up, and like you can do it right now, maybe if you're listening to this later, if you hit Control Find and look for abortion, you'll see it 46 times. Okay, so this whole thing is about abortion. It's about reproductive health care. It's about abortion. So what Tara was just describing, by the way, that situation where it's don't tell the sponsor, not only is that the actual case of what they do, where it's like, hey, we found the sponsor and we're going to move the kid, but she's got an abortion scheduled. They elevate that to the federal field specialist. So I didn't know what that was. That sounds like, oh, what does that mean? Those are basically the rock stars that are in charge of the show at all these little camps. So they elevate it to basically the dude running the show to make sure that they can get it done. But here's a crazy thing. So let's say they HHS takes custody and they're going to figure out where these kids are going to go. Like, hey, what state should they go to? They will prioritize moving a pregnant girl to a state that has no restrictions on abortions. They will not move that kid to a state that has bans on abortion. So that's happening straight up first things off, right? Secondly, because the government loves to talk about how this is all about family reunification. In there, if a girl and a sibling, like let's say a brother, come across the border together and they're going to go, oh, well, that girl needs an abortion. What should we do? They will move the girl away from the brother. They will split up the family to make sure they get that abortion done. Like, I'm not kidding. This policy was written by the state. If they need to get the doctor, for whatever reason, has to get some type of like approval from whoever's in custody, guess who gives the approval? It's HHS. Like, this is the level that it really is. It's I gotta stop talking. It's bad.
Yeah. No, and I had talked about this with our Anthony to Anthony and Oscar Blue. Oscar Blue, for those who follow me, chances are you know who I'm talking about. He's a reporter, correspondent for Real America's Voice News, and someone who I consider a friend. I greatly appreciate him. Him and Ben Berkram were just down there in the Darien Gap. And one of the times that I was on his show and we were talking about, I was talking about exactly this. Gosh, it feels like forever ago. It was probably about a year and a half ago where I was talking about exactly this, was that the GARSA requirements. And I just kind of showed, I pulled up, it was 21, Field Guidance 21, which is still active. There again, another thing that they're using our taxpayer dollars for. And here in the state of Texas, when we had the trigger law take into effect after the overturning of Roe versus Wade, some of the left-wing organizations were screaming bloody murder, and they were talking about this, like, oh, these children that were abused, these poor migrants, which, I mean, yeah, they are abused. I know this firsthand, right? I've talked to many of them. They're raped and abused. Let's talk about why that is happening, because the policies are incentivizing this, especially incentivizing these young children, these unaccompanied minors, to come where they're facing these abuses, a lot of these abuses that they did not face when they were in their own home countries. They faced it along the way. But this was exactly one of the things too that and I could go down that rabbit hole where I have been desperately trying and researching, because if you guys remember, I think it was at the University of Maryland, where it was disclosed, I believe it was Judicial Watch. And this is how I started going down this rabbit hole, where they had talked about again, kind of the same thing like where Project Veritas, where James O'Keefe really got started, was the organ harvesting of aborted babies, right? And when I'm down there in the RGV in the Rio Grande Valley sector, and I'm down there looking at right across from Catholic Charities where these buses are, and this was the height of COVID, not too, just a few months after Biden was inaugurated, and I'm seeing these young girls, every single one of them big pregnant, coming from Catholic Charities to the COVID testing facilities and then walking to the bus stations. Every single one of them, huge, big, pregnant. And what is going through my mind is, what are all of these, like, is it possible that after the University of Maryland study, I believe it was University of Maryland, that came out and said, well, yeah, they were organ harvesting, they were doing these abortions, and that they needed a certain percentage of aborted fetuses from minorities. And I'm going, and what am I staring at? Nothing but minorities, young women who are big, pregnant. And you can't tell me, because they're paying for abortions and they have been down there in Mexico. Do you get that connection that I'm trying to make there?
The answer is
the
yes.
Very possible thing that I see.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
But I feel like I'm crazy sometimes. And that's why I appreciate you guys, because now it's not just Sheena Rodriguez, homeschooling mom, that's saying this, that's making these connections. It's you guys. Tara, yes, please.
Well, I mean, anybody can look at the data and see that they do that on intake. I mean, it's in their forms. Anybody can look at it and see that every single female is tested for pregnancy. Now, the other thing is they sometimes have what they call cycling of the children through the programs and through the borders. So sometimes they'll have a child, depending on which immigration law is in force at the moment, right? They'll have a child come through with people so that they all come through together. And then they were finding that children were being recycled. Well, let's just say that you're running a brothel in Mexico or Guatemala or El Salvador, and you need to keep aborting children, right? Of these young girls who get pregnant, working in brothels. Imagine that. Well, you just cycle them through the UC program where they can have safe, effective abortions, right? So this is a loophole that we as the federal government should not go down. We are aiding and abetting these types of criminal activities. And this is what I just wish people could understand, is that some of these children have very happy, healthy lives in their home country, and they are lured here, right? By force, fraud, coercion. They're lured here, and it's not for, like, drugs are a one-time use. These children are being used over and over and over again, whether that's labor trafficking or sex trafficking. They're using these children for evil purposes. And we are aiding and abetting. We're creating the pull because we're telling the trafficker. So trafficker here, right? These are members of transnational criminal organizations. Okay. These are heartless people who see the children as product. It's their assets. So when they find out that, hey, all I got to do is get the child to the border, and then the government takes over, and then the government is going to fly the child white glove service to my house. Well, of course, they're going to be like, yes, we're going to try to get as many kids as we possibly can, because the federal government is paying the ticket to fly these children all around the country. They're building up networks all over the United States, as evidenced by just the labor trafficking that you've seen, right? So it's absolutely evil. And I just don't think they don't fully grasp what's happening. They don't get it. And policies have consequences. And we have, it's a terrible.
But Tara, please tell them too, because that fake New York Times article that's like, oh, but they just rescued 100 kids. Tara, those 100 kids that got rescued, and by the way, thankfully, but what happens to them next?
Yeah, so those children are brought back into HHS care so that another sponsor can be identified. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So, yeah.
You will get everyone under the sun right now doing because when people start talking about this, and then they'll get the pushback, because I've gotten myself the blind pushback of, no, but there's home studies. No, there's not. Oh, but they vet the sponsor. No, they don't. Oh, but they save the kids. No, they don't. Like, all these things are just, no, they're not at all. And by the way, to anybody if you have any Fed friends that are just going to try to go like, no way, we're not doing this. They couldn't identify sex trafficking when we identified there were sex traffickers getting kids. So it's just like, that's the level. You just got to write them off and go, this is not a conversation for you, dude. Like, that's how you got to treat the federal government in this sense. This is not about you, man. Like, you guys have lost it. You got to go away now. So take ownership of the conversation.
Yeah. And I would strongly encourage people to watch Trafficked in America. And that show
by PBS, right?
Yeah.
It was PBS.
Yes. And that is the expose on the 2014 trafficking under the Obama-Biden administration. It is what's outlined in this Senate report. And they explain and they show exactly how they lured the children. They show the conditions they were living in. These children did not even have a toilet. They had a bucket in the trailer where they were all living and working on an egg farm in total slave labor. So this is absolutely unacceptable. And so, again, speaking in my personal capacity as a American who sees what's happening, if I could wave a magic wand, I would, and if I was the governor of a state, I would be like, okay, friends, you do not have the right to send children into my state without letting me know the address to where they're going and the sponsor to whom they are going to be living with. There is no right in our country to be a sponsor. That's not a right that anybody has. You want to be a sponsor of a child, then you get to go on a database. There's no reason why one child should be missing. This is the thing that's stunning to me. Oh, the children are gone. Why? When you know exactly where the sponsor is. You have the photo ID of the sponsor. You know the address of the sponsor. They need to go after the sponsors. It is not a right to be a sponsor of a child, no more than it's a right to be a foster parent or anything else. It's unacceptable. And they know exactly where these children are or should be because HHS has the information. The states should be like, I demand it. I want to know where these kids are.
And this is where local cops, and sheriffs can come into play because they can, okay, fine, the kids are in my district now, start going to the schools and, hey, what are the truancy rates? Like there are so many possible responses thing. It's so easy.
Yes, and oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say one other very critical thing. If I'm a law enforcement officer in Texas, okay, and you said how many have been just in the 2 counties where you are?
And just Tarrant County, which I'm in Tarrant County, and Dallas County, which is neighboring, and just our 2 counties alone. And that's what I was going to lead to my next question with you, Tara, before we kind of start reeling it in, make sure that we have all the information tied up of where people can follow us and the action item. But in just Tarrant County and Dallas alone, since FY21, over 8,600 that have been released to sponsors according to HHS and OR.
Okay, so my question would be, as a law enforcement person, who are these sponsors? Because we now know for sure, 100% evidence, some of these are high-level criminal actors. They're high-level criminal actors they're transnational organized criminals, right? They're on the talk. And you're allowing these people to live, operate, and you're sending children to bad actors, but you're not telling me what is up with that. That makes there is no way anybody can explain to me how that the federal government has data on who these high-level criminal actors are, and they're not telling people. It defies belief. And had I not seen it with my own eyes, I couldn't believe it. Had Aaron not had the courage to come forward to stand up for the children and be like, wait a minute, guys, we're giving children to sex traffickers. Had he not done that, I might have never even known that. But then I saw it with my own eyes. So it's absolutely unacceptable. And no law enforcement officer should stand up for this. It could be that fast to find them.
Yes, and that's the other important part of this thing, especially with immigration, because all these illegals that are doing this trying to sponsor kids, they're exploiting the loophole of going, oh no, I need to get asylum. And I'm not kidding, that process will take up to 5-6 years. It is a very, very long-term thing.
And it's backlogged even more. It'll probably be even more because it's even more backlogged. Yep.
Right. And just to see the judge, they have to go before the asylum officer to get their like temporary, positive review, their temporary yes to stay in the country. It's given out like candy. About 80% of the credible fear and the reasonable fear cases, like 80% of those things are given a yes. But then immigration judges, 5 years down the road, they're denying them at about an 80% rate. So it's just completely flipped over. And it's just like, okay, so once again, federal government, you guys have created this entire problem because if those sponsors weren't here, where do the kids go? Long-term care. Not that that's like the best thing in the world, but they're not getting sex and labor trafficked right away. It's just like, it is evil and you can't say it's not.
Right. And one of the other things that we can do, and Tara, I'm about to, don't let me forget, I wanted to ask you, because I know that a lot of the information that came out in the Project Veritas drop was children, like 40 UCs in Austin area. As I'm sitting there going into state legislators' offices, I'm like, they're right here. 300 of them were, and this is just the little bit from this investigation, right? Like this is by no means not all encompassing. 300 of them was in Houston from what they found. And then were there any found in the DFW area from this investigation that you're aware of?
Yeah. Well, one case that I've never shared before either is our interesting Dallas case. So what's interesting is that when the children are on the site, right, sometimes the case managers, we had over 200 case managers. So imagine this open bay. I mean, it was huge, the ballroom that we were working in the Pomona Fairplex. And it had just rows and rows of tables, and case managers would sit on one side and the children would file in and sit on the other. But the case managers, they would get to know each other, and, they would sometimes chat about their cases. We always encourage them to be sharing information about their cases. Well, it just so happened that two girls discovered that they each had a child who was going to the same sponsor in Dallas. And they were like, well, that's interesting. And so the next time one of the case managers had her child come in, she said, oh, so you crossed the border, with the other kid. And he's like, no, I don't know who you're talking about. So these two children did not know each other, going to the same sponsor in Texas. So when we started looking into that sponsor, we realized, because that guy had lied on his forms, both he and his brother had sponsored before, they owned a landscaping company, had used multiple addresses. And so then the case managers had to tell the children, I'm sorry, this person is off the list. So then they got two new sponsors. So the first sponsor, X, negativo. So then we give them they each got different sponsors.
And this is in Dallas, right? This is in the Dallas area,
Texas. I have all the data, all the information. May have already given it to some people in Texas, but I believe I have passed this case forward. But so then the children go to two separate sponsors, and then to those separate sponsors, we found that they were tied to other trafficking. So one of the children went into long-term care. The other child was so disillusioned. He's like, so many people have lied to me. He did what's called a voluntary departure. He requested to go home. And we tried so hard to be like, look, we can take care of you. We can put you in long-term care. We can make sure that you're taken care of. And he's like, everybody's lied to me. And this little child said, I want to go home. So when the children figure out what's happened, with just a little bit of looking into the cases, people could easily identify that this is trafficking, that the children don't know who they're going to, with just a little bit of effort. And we can prevent children from going to these horrific situations. It's absolutely unconscionable. But yes, it's all over the country. It's going on all over the country.
And so our current call to action, in the spirit of also, like Aaron said, and Aaron, I want to, guys, Tara and Aaron, seriously, you guys are my heroes. Because again, I'm so thankful for you guys. I know that you guys have risked a lot, and to even just come forth, to have the bravery. And Aaron, you said in one of the, I think actually in both of the interviews with the Drops with Project Veritas, you had said it's like a no-brainer, right? Like, yeah, I'm going to lose my job. And you did. Tara, I think I know that they were going after you, right? And like, you guys risked a lot. Me being down there and seeing and knowing what I know, and just even going down there, I can tell you, I even get personal messages and threats nonstop, and from very scary type of people. But the thing that keeps on getting back to me, and Aaron, you said this too, like, but just in different words, is when people ask, like, why? For me, I'm very passionate about it because this is a pro-life issue. I've said that from the very beginning. This to me is an extension of the pro-life issue. But when you see these children and you know that this is happening, no matter the cost to Tara, Aaron, and on a very small, minute scale, myself, that is nothing compared to what these children have gone through and are going through. These children that just, in many cases, just don't exist, that we're helping to fund doing this to. And like you said, I mean, to those little kids, those little, like the little girls that I've encountered right here, I can't, somebody has to speak up. These
Yeah.
kids don't have a voice. So yes.
No, yeah.
Go ahead.
And can I get a little Christian real quick?
Please.
Of course.
Because Jesus Christ, Son and Logos of God, was very clear when he talked about protecting children. You pick your favorite one and just run with it. But it's like the people that are ignorant about it, whatever, I don't know. People that are doing it, I don't want to be them. But if you have the knowledge of this and you have the capacity to do something, and that's going to be on you. So I've said this to a few other, shows I've gone on to. Donate your time. That's the thing that people could always help with, right? Just donate some time and to do it, whatever it is that you're good at. So if like you're a good, media editor or a good writer, volunteer at some type of organization that's combating these things, or at least raising awareness or whatever. Sheena, if you need someone to move boxes, manage a database, like get involved at this level, because that's how it works. Because I keep telling people too, this is my personal opinion, I think the only agent to change this is going to be moms and women, because they get, like, I've talked to dudes, I've talked to women. Dudes will get kind of like, oh man, that sucks. And they might get upset about it. But like moms get pissed and they don't stop asking questions. Women get like angry. And
it's
like
personal. It's personal.
Right.
So like if you're watching this, and if you know any mom group, like get this to them. And I'm not kidding. Like I will come out there and like really brief you guys like what the hell is going on, because when you go to the government, and maybe even state level, you never know who you're going to talk to with those things, because they're politicians. They're going to talk you out of it. That's what they do. And you have to be armed with what's going on. You have to know what's going on, so that way you also know who the liars are that are going to be fighting for this thing to continue. And you got to be the stronger one, the smarter one, to be able to fight back against it, because this seriously is evil. And when I say that, I do mean like the diabolical Satan. Mm-hmm. This is the influence that's doing these things, I think, at least. And I could be wrong on that one, and prove me wrong if you want to. But again, Jesus Christ was very clear when he told us of protecting children. This is a very, very simple thing. We have to be the ones doing it. So that's that.
And so to that point, we know that we're all about action here. And I want to make sure as we're closing it out that we have all the information of how people can, follow you guys, help you guys, and help spread your message. But right here in the state of Texas, and even if you're not in the great state of Texas, number one, I apologize. But number two, you can do similar to what I've been trying to do here. And I have that all important update to this action item. We just started our ADA session here. I put out a lot of information about bills that Alliance for a Safe Texas is supporting, right? That is all important. Follow me on the Substack, Mid-Cities Conservative, because that's where I'm putting out the action items, and of course on our social media. But the biggest action item is just this. We've found a sponsor for our letter, a legislative sponsor for our letter, someone who is willing to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. We need more people just like that here in Texas and throughout the United States. And that letter is actually asking for the launch of the investigation into the trafficking of the unaccompanied minors right here in the state of Texas. We may not be able to control what is happening in California or New York or Arizona or any of these things. But we sure as heck need to be looking into this, because again, like Aaron said, and like Tara said, it is the the federal agencies that are doing this, and asking them to investigate themselves is nonsensical. They're promoting this, they're incentivizing this. We here in the great state of Texas should launch this investigation into the trafficking occurring right here with some of the evidence that we discussed today. And so Representative Stan Kitzman, who represents a part of Colorado County, or all of Colorado County, where some of these NGO facilities like Endeavors is attempting to open up more permanent facilities. He's very passionate about this, and I'm so grateful to him for sponsoring the letter. You guys can go to securetheboarder.us, the Take Action tab, and on there we have the copy of the exact verbiage. For those of you guys who have been following me for a while, I've been talking about this for quite some time. You can download it right here. It's going to be the same exact verbiage. It's just obviously on Representative Kitzman's letterhead. I can tell you as of right now, I believe we're up to about 7 or 8 other state legislators that have signed on to it. I have been out there not just fighting for legislation, but walking into offices, Democrats and Republicans alike. I even went into my personal, my representative, which is Representative Bojani. He is a Democrat. Ideologically, we're not going to agree on a lot of things, but I met him face to face. He was cordial enough to speak with me. And I asked him to sign on to this, to show Texans, if you really care about stopping the exploitation of children here in our state, this is one thing that we can unite behind, right, is to ask for the launch of this investigation. And so that's what we're doing, because I, as a regular citizen, those of you guys who are listening right now, you as a regular citizen, we do not have the quote right to ask for such a launch of an investigation, but our state legislators can. So thank you to Representative Kitzman. So the call to action, like Aaron said, give me 5 minutes of your time. Send an email to your state senator and your state representative, Democrat or Republican. This doesn't matter. This is not a partisan issue. This is an good versus evil issue. Okay. Send them this podcast afterwards. This is going to be up, this broadcast, of course, on our social media. You can also find it on the Substack. The podcast version, audio version will be up on there. Send that link to your state representatives. Say, hey, we want you to listen to this. And then we want you to sign on to this letter from Representative Stan Kitzman's office showing support. Representative or senator, they can all sign on to it. We want as much information or as much signatures and support as possible. And then hopefully we'll be able to even do a press release before this letter is officially sent off, to raise awareness that this is happening right here in our state. And so again, and then to those who are working inside of the schools, right? If you're a teacher or if you're an administrator inside of the schools, you deal with these children coming in, because if you're unaccompanied minors, the vast majority of them are going to be school age type children, right? You would think, like Aaron and Tara said, that if you're coming in here and you see things suspicious, right? If you're law enforcement, DPD, shout out to DPD, Dallas PD, and Fort Worth Sheriff's Office and Fort Worth PD. We have a task force here, a trafficking task force that I get to go to whenever I'm in town. Anti-sex trafficking task force here in Tarrant County. Raise those alarms if you're an insider. Ask for those questions, like Aaron said. We have the sheriff in the county is the has the most constitutional authority on the county level. There are things that we can do. Signing on to this letter, give me 5 minutes of your time, like Aaron said. Time. Give me 5 minutes of your time. If you don't know who your state representative is, go straight on there. You can click here and it says who represents me on securetheboarder.us, the Take Action tab. You can click there, enter in your zip code, and get those numbers or their emails, or send PM me, send me a private message, or you can email me at securetheboarder.us. You can send me an email and say, hey, Sheena, I need help finding out who my state legislator is. And then don't stop there. Contact our state senators. Let them know, our congressional senators. Contact your representative. Raise the alarm.
Yes.
Tell people, share this podcast, share, like and share, right? We're not just saying that just because it makes me feel good. I feel good already by being connected to people like this and trying to raise the alarm. I've been fighting out there in the state capitol. My sneakers are worn out. I need new sneakers now because our capitol's huge. I'm going into the belly of the beast, talking and pleading with these people because it's hard. Like Aaron said, when you know it and you see it firsthand and it becomes personal, I know what I know. I know what I see, and I'm not going to stop until I can look at my children in the eyes and say, I did absolutely everything I humanly could. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking for. 5 minutes to encourage them to sign on to this letter. And Aaron, you had said something during the last drop as well, and you said it when we did our Twitter space. We were all doing a Twitter space not too long ago. You feel encouraged. And I know right now a lot of people are like, what do you mean? Because I've said the same thing. People ask me, Sheena, I know that, you're down there and you're fighting, you're doing all this stuff that you must get discouraged, you must get down. And I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of times where I'm coming home and it's utter silence. There's a lot of times where I've been up at night and I can't sleep because so many things are going through my head. But in the end, I know God wins. But you had said during the last drop and during the Twitter space that like you're encouraged in a sense. And can you tell people why you're encouraged? What you're encouraged by as we close out?
And there's a billion things you can encourage about because there's a lot of people, and if you choose to do it, you'd be surprised like just how fast things can get done. And it's not a judgment thing, by the way. And I'm not sitting here like high and mighty thinking I'm better than people. People have lives, and sometimes I've asked people, a lot of people actually, like, what prevents you from doing stuff? And the biggest answer is like, I don't know what to do. So you already got the answer. Sheena, good job on that one. Thank you. But it doesn't take much to get involved in doing things. So yeah, it's a simple thing. People get pissed once they know about it. Go through your emotions. Tara and I have already done it. We've cried our tears.
Oh,
And then
yes.
take your steps. But can I say one more thing, by the way, too? This is the important part.
Please.
Not that anything we said wasn't important, but this is a different thing. Is that, for 9 months, Tara, the investigator that worked with Tara, the work that she had to do, that person, I can't even imagine it. And like the investigator or the journalist I worked with as well, what they had to go through to do these stories and like kind of get this information out there. We're not here right now talking about this, fighting it without them doing their job. And I just seen a lot of people online saying bad things about like all of the, Project Veritas people and the employees and everything. And I can't tell you guys how hard it has been on just me sitting at a computer, learning about this program and learning the stats and going through this stuff, let alone actually walking and coming across these kids like you have, Sheena. So just from the bottom of my heart, I really am thankful for everyone that has done work on this stuff, because it's not just the people on camera. It's also the faceless, nameless people off of it that are behind the scenes doing a lot of these work. And
Yes.
my prayers are for you guys too. They're for the kids as well, but it's like, this is not something to fight about or to do whatever about. This is a very simple thing. We have to be involved in stopping this.
Yes.
In the end, God judges us. And I hope he looks at me and says, whatever I've done is good, but that's that.
Yeah.
Tara?
And I was just going to say, one voice does make a difference. It does make a difference. And if you're listening to this, you're listening to this for a reason. And it is my absolute hope and prayer that you would take action for these children. You can be their voice. Right now, there are children in crisis, and they need someone to come rescue them. And the only way that's going to happen is if we all begin to get involved. I did not intend to be the voice for unaccompanied children. I had no idea children were being trafficked through this program. My husband and I together have cried lots of tears over this. This has been a horrible thing to understand that our government is involved in, something I've given my whole life to, my career, to sit back and say, how could another federal employee do this? But you can make a difference. So thank you, Sheena. And obviously thanks to Aaron. And I just, want to say, if you have extra dollars to donate to Alliance for Safe Texas, or to Aaron's Give, Send, Go. Aaron, is it Give, Send, Go DHS whistleblower? I know you're not going to ask.
And Aaron, I would like to. If you could send that to me, Aaron, as well, so this way, because we'll air this podcast will air live, and I'm going to make sure that that link is in the comment section as well.
Yeah,
so if you wouldn't mind,
I don't know the URL. I don't know. I'll have to find it for you, but.
Okay. Yeah. I know Aaron's not going to ask for himself, but I would definitely, if you can, you never know. God gives everybody different resources. If yours is financial, support these two, because what they're doing is really amazing. So anyway, thanks
And
everybody for your time.
on that note, Tara, where can people follow you and support you as well? Where can they follow you?
I don't need any financial support. I still have my federal job because my agency, when HHS, kicked me off the site and took my badge, my agency was like, we're going to send agents to get you if you need. So my agency took me back. They're like, what's going on with these crazy people at HHS? So I still have my federal job. So for now, I mean, we'll see. I'm not going to stop talking about this, but my Twitter handle is just at Tara Lee Rodas. That's me. So, and I intend to be in this fight until children are no longer being trafficked through this program. There's transparency and there are controls. So, but please financially support these two.
And Aaron, where can people find you?
That's my Twitter handle, called out DHS. And, I don't have like a bunch of followers. So if I got pushback from somebody, tag me somewhere, I will jump in and talk with you. Sheena knows I go into Twitter spaces to talk about these things. So, I'm very active in these things, but I will not do it at a establishment level. The change is us. Like, it's down here. This is where it actually happens at. So, and by the way, also, because if no one's ever met Tara before, I keep saying this, you jump back and forth between like, am I talking to a hero or am I talking to an angel? She's probably one of the best people I've ever met in my entire life. Like, she's amazing. So
beautiful inside and out. Really, this was the first time that I got to speak with both of you guys. But when Tara got on the screen as we were getting ready for this, I was just like, gosh, this is a very humbling moment for a small stay-at-home mom that's just hyped up on a lot of caffeine on a mission that I get to speak with true heroes and someone like Tara that is just beautiful inside and out. Aaron, you're beautiful too. We're not going to be, but you both of you guys are just amazing, godly people. Thank you.
Stay at home moms. That's the strongest soldier in this fight. I'm telling you, it's the women that care the most. Like, that's going to be the ones. So yeah, thank you all.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you guys so much. And guys, also, in addition to hopefully financially supporting Aaron and following and sharing their stories, Tara and Aaron's stories, when they came forward with the information and sharing this podcast, please pray for them. Keep them in your prayers. That is also one of the biggest things. And just pray over all of this. If we're going to survive any of this, we have to go back to state sovereignty. You now know the issue, and now you also have a direct action item. Securetheborder.us, securetheborder.us. Go to the Take Action tab, and then please find us on the Substack. That's where you're going to get your action items. You can sign up. I do have it for free there as well. You do not have to pay. If you're able to help financially by setting up I think I have it set for like $6 a month or something. You can do that, but absolutely everything that I post, including the action items, are free because this is important to get this information. So follow everybody on social media, securetheborder.us, take action, no excuses. You know what's wrong. Now do something about it. 5 minutes of your time. That's all we're asking for. So thank you, Tara. Thank you, Aaron. God bless you. I pray for a hedge of protection and blessings around you guys and your families. I am just so humbled by you guys. Thank you for your sacrifice, a continued sacrifice. So thank you guys so very much.
And thank you, Sheena. Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll go ahead and close on out. Everybody, thank you guys so much for tuning in. And I hope God bless. And let's continue to do all that we can to stay active, engaged, and involved and secure our border and save our sweet Texas. God bless and have a great night.